And I think grief is something that's really hard to talk about. Like, it took me a long time to figure out how to really talk about it, and I still don't know if I can talk about it in a way that this film does.
Immigration is at the top of the headlines these days. But stepping back from the issues of policy and legality, it's helpful to remember that America has always been a country of immigrants trying to make the best of their new lives, dealing with all of the opportunities and challenges that come with living in a new and unfamiliar place. In her debut feature, Blue Sun Palace, filmmaker Constance Tsang presents us with an intimate tale of Chinese immigrants centered around a massage parlor in Flushing, New York. Avoiding the sensationalism that one might expect from this setting, Tsang shapes an immigrant's tale, a relationship drama, a workplace comedy, and a great New York story all in one. The film is anchored by the sensitive performances of relative newcomers Qixi Wu and Haipeng Xu, and the veteran actor Lee Kang-Sheng, all of whom create characters that are incredibly real and memorable. A prize winner at Cannes and a sensation at the recent New Directors New Films Festival in New York, Blue Sun Palace is opening in theaters in New York and Los Angeles before rolling out to the rest of the country. You won't want to miss this film. And you won't want to miss our conversation with filmmaker Constance Tsang on Inside the Arthouse, starting now.
Hi, my name is Greg Lemley.
And I'm Raphael Sparge.
And welcome to another episode of Inside the Arthouse. Today we're joined by Constance Tsang. She is the writer and director of the new film Blue Sun Palace, which is going to be opening on April 25th in New York and Los Angeles. Constance, thank you for joining us on Inside the Arthouse.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Greg. I'm so excited.
This is an amazing film. It knocked me out. I wondered if you could talk about, I mean, I know you grew up in Flushing, you're a New Yorker, and this is a very intimate portrait of New York. I wonder if you could talk about your sort of journey to write it, to kind of birth it, as it were, because it is so deeply personal, and I'd be so interested to hear how you found your way there.
So I started writing this in about 2019, 2020, and I think the first iterations of the script itself was very much centered on what was happening during that time. So the Atlanta spa shootings, I was also thinking about the incident that happened in Flushing in a massage parlor in regards to Song Yang. So all of that kind of set the context to the story that I was trying to write. And in the first, I think, drafts of the film, it was much more standardized than the film that I ended up making, where it follows, a really kind of hero's journey, where the story itself followed a massage parlor worker trying to figure out how to survive. Like, it just felt so much more plotted than what the film actually is now. And over time, I think from being and really understanding what the story meant to me, it evolved to the shape and the themes about grief, about longing, about finding connection, and all of that happened much later on, I would say. And slowly, it really, to me, was a film where I wanted to connect with the place I grew up in, the people that really shaped how I understood the immigrant experience. For example, my parents, and I think my own relationship to death, and also how I was trying to make sense of grief myself. So that was, I think, the sort of initial thoughts, and then the movement towards where we are now.
Yeah. And did you continue writing during the COVID lockdown?
I did. So a lot of the structure, I think, changed for me, like end of 2020, 2021, where it became a lot more fragmented. And so the story didn't just center on the singular protagonist. It broke into these three characters. And that I felt much more connected, I think, to the three characters, because they were different versions of essentially one singular character.
So the film is centered around essentially one of the many massage, I don't want to say parlors, but massage businesses that are all around the city that many people frequent for many, health reasons and other reasons. There are obviously, sort of gray areas in that. And you talk about all three immigrants who essentially whose lives collide and are sort of then these themes of grief. I know you said in your director's note that you lost your father at 16 and that it was hard to sort of figure out what to do with that grief.
which is represented in what you wrote. I mean, it's gorgeous in the movie, but I wondered if you could talk about it.
Yeah, that character specifically of Chong, who's played by Lee Kang-Sheng in the film, is absolutely a version of my father and a version of, I think, the men that my family has come in contact in their life, and they're sort of business friends and also work friends. And so that sort of archetype of a character is someone that is quite known to me. And I think in trying to understand my father through all of this, and to understand, I think, his relationship with my mother and also how I felt about that relationship, like all of that was a starting point for this character. And I think grief is something that's really hard to talk about. And because I had lost him when I was so young, I didn't really quite make sense of it until honestly when I started writing this film. Like, it took me a long time to figure out how to really talk about it. And I still don't know if I can talk about it in a way that this film does. Like, I think Blue Sun Palace and what I was trying to do is to express all the things I don't know how to say verbally. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I ended up in trying to make sense of these feelings. And for me, and what I was trying to do with this film, and also the way that we shot it, like, it feels like grief is something that feels like almost like mud, like you're trudging through it. And I think that was really something that stuck out to me in writing this and also shooting it, and in the way that we visualized it.
It is a challenging emotion. I mean, grief, there's almost a sense where they're not grief. Well, I don't know if it's grief. I mean, it's loss for sure, and guilt. Yeah. And we can feel guilt about those who we've lost, or guilt who people we're separated from. In the case of these people who have families that they're thinking about, and the lives that they're living disconnected from their home. And that is what loss. I mean, it's loss whether if we lose a parent, we're disconnected from them. We can't reconnect other than through our emotions. So it's really a lot of those things, and it's beautiful, and it's not a sad film by any stretch, but it is somewhat haunted, I guess.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's also the starting point of where I began to understand Dee Dee's character and the haunting presence that she has over the film, and also how the two other characters relate to her presence and the loss of the presence, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she connects them, and yet, their reaction to that connection is, says a lot about them. There's nothing, it's not a right way or a wrong way, but each of them has their own sort of, reaction to that. Beautifully realized.
What's so striking, it's interesting as you talk about it, is that the difference between grief and depression, at least as you sort of paint it in the film, is how active the grief is in a way, how there's so much sort of searching in it, and you found a visual language for it that feels doesn't ever feel saccharine or depressing. It just feels there's almost like a yearning in it. And when you worked with your DP, I mean, clearly Flushing, having grown up there, those landscapes seem very familiar to you. And again, the intimacy of those places, more so than someone sort of sweeping in and sort of doing some location scouting and then this looks good. These places clearly have a lot of meaning, and I wonder how you evolved that with your DP, how you found that, and what that process was of finding the locations and the visual language.
So some of the locations I had already written them in mind. So the construction supply store was a place that I had frequented since I was a child. I know the owners well, and that was something that was a very kind of strong starting point to, I think, the look and feel and what the locations would signify to me and mean to me. I guess after I had written the script and we started moving into the preparation of this film, I would location scout first on my own. It was just kind of me walking through Flushing, walking through Queens, and looking at all of these different massage businesses and trying to see who would be even interested in opening up their place of business to us. And from then on, I had brought my DP normally into the fold. Sometimes when he wasn't, busy shooting his other commercials or films, we would kind of go together and just walk around and really get to know the business owners and really talk to them about what the film meant and what was it about. And we wanted to approach the locations and finding this place from a place of wanting to make this film with our community. And I wanted to make that very clear from the get-go, that this wasn't just like a job where we would enter, leave a huge footprint, and then leave. Like, I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to make sure that they were as much as a collaborative process, even in this stage, as much as possible. So that was how we approached it.
That's fascinating. How did they respond? I mean, clearly people responded because they said yes, but what was that like to kind of actually see them get the idea or get them what you were trying to say? What kind of response did you get?
Yeah, so sometimes first of all, it was hard because, my first language is Cantonese, and a lot of these businesses in Flushing they speak Mandarin, and sometimes I would use my broken Mandarin to try to communicate with them, and I would have on like my iPad or printed out on a piece of paper, like a little bit of what the film was about. So it felt a little bit like I was like, selling candy or something like that.
Right.
And it was very much me being like, hey, I grew up in Flushing and here's a little bit about the film that I'm making. Would you be interested? If so, let me give you my contact information. So it felt very, like a Girl Scout almost.
I mean, trust is not something that these businesses necessarily extend easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially now.
Especially now.
And perhaps when you shot the film, there was a little more room for that.
Yeah, sometimes it would be a situation where they've never had a production come into their space of business before. And sometimes they were like, well, we just shot this Amazon show and we're asking for $10,000 a day. So it was kind of like a mixture of people that were completely new to it and like spaces that were clearly seasoned of New York City productions.
Seasoned or poisoned. I don't know what word is right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, they were more or less, I think, once they established a sense of trust, it was much easier to kind of tell them what we were looking for.
For the audience, yes, the film has a very strong sense of place, and yet it could be anywhere. It's a completely American story, and I grew up in Los Angeles, and I can point to communities within LA that are like this. I'm currently in Seattle, and there are communities here, whether they're Asian immigrants or Hispanic or Ethiopian communities, places where you can be in America and not speak English.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was really a point in how we chose to show the exteriors, if at all. I think what was important to me was that when we did decide to shoot in these locations, that it would be tethered to the character. That whatever choices that we had made in terms of what they were seeing and the sort of subjectivity that connected location and space to character, like that was something that I was prioritizing most of the time as we were devising the story. And also something to add about locations.
Please.
No, please.
Because it is, I think locations for me, and it's something that I've come to realize about filmmaking and what actually makes, for me, what is something that stays with me and makes a frame really strong is the locations you choose. What are the sort of I think devices that you're actually seeing in the frame itself? How are you understanding the dynamics of the space? What is it giving to you? And that I think it really changed the way that I thought about the frame. So I would just like to add that about locations.
I'd love for you to talk to more about that. I mean, it's so striking. I mean, I know this is your first feature, as they say, very auspicious beginning, because it's so
assured
and right, so self-assured. And I know you came through Columbia Film Program, and even just sort of the choice, for example, to use one camera in a scene with two people who are both eating, and to really just allow the camera to kind of really just sort of float between them to sort of find the emotion and or find the bubble in the conversation, I guess, in a way. Just to do that, just even that decision to do that, I guess I'm curious how you found that, and or because it's part of the visual language. It's so It just makes us feel like we're sitting at the table with you.
I mean, I'm sure both of you know that I am not the first director to do this. So there are many that have come before me that I greatly admire. And I think Colombia was definitely a great experience for me to see what was possible in terms of filmmaking and the types of filmmaking that I was exposed to. That being said, I had a thesis advisor, Bogdana Petri, he's part of the Romanian New Wave. His last couple of films were also shot basically one take per scene. And I had also watched at that time Ho Xiaoxian's Flowers of Shanghai. So I was very interested in the way that stories and narratives can unfold in something that is so simple, but so beautiful. And that, to me, I think when you're looking at cinema and the sort of, nuts and bolts of it is what I'd like to continually get better at. How do you find the essence? And I think shooting in this particular style, it's I intuitively understand it better than if I were to do different camera setups. And I think the challenge of what the shooting style presents itself, it's very fun to me. And I like utilizing blocking and figuring out the right camera setup to have the entire scene unfold. All of that is something that excites me. And I like that as a choice in kind of supporting the narrative of the film. It's also easier for me to edit.
I guess you got one take, right? You're just you have
exactly.
to, you just they already let it play, right?
Right,
Yeah,
but is it
exactly.
easier for the actors as well? Or not easier, but different for the actors? Because, yes, you have to make this long take work, but you also get to really feel the scene happening as opposed to, okay, we're going to shoot one line of dialogue and then we're going to move the camera and shoot another line of dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's just a different preparation process, I think. And I was lucky enough to have, I think, incredibly strong actors that the style for them is very they've done it before and they kind of know exactly the tone I'm trying to find in the story. So I do, I'm very grateful that I had these actors.
In the scenes with the women at the massage parlor where they're taking photos or they're making dinner or they're just kind of being women together, how did you find? Was some of that improv? Did that sort of feel? It feels so spontaneous and so alive. I guess I just wonder how you found that. How did you get that from them?
Some of it was improv. I think I had loosely, if you were to read the script, it would just be women are having fun together. Something like that, right?
Nailed it. Right.
Okay. But all of those, I would say all of those beats were in the script itself, but the actual scene and when we were filming it, it was just very much as you're seeing it. It was spontaneous, absolutely. And I was basically giving them a cue, some props. What were you going to do together? And the sort of chemistry I think that these women had together were integral to you experiencing that magic because it was so natural for them to be in the space and to take photos together. And each of the women, I think, had very different personalities and the sort of friendship that they found in this group and with each other. It's not something that is from me, but from themselves. So they were just honestly having a lot of fun and I was having fun with them. And I was, kind of just adding fuel to their fire a little bit.
Great. And again, just so confident just to be able to kind of just sort of say hey, run, let's go find it. That's just thrilling. And it sparkles.
Cause I want to take photos with them, Raphael, I'm there, I'm their biggest cheerleader from the sideline. I feel like when I am on set and I am close to my actors, it's the best because I'm basically giving them sort of my own energy into this and they just kind of take it and run with it. So it's very fun. And my entire crew too, being on set, everyone had, especially in those scenes with the women, we had a great time.
Talk about the casting of Lee Kang-Sheng. It doesn't anchor the film necessarily. It's not his story, but provides a very strong base for everybody else to sort of riff off.
Yeah, for sure. So I think maybe 2 years or something before we shot it, I had watched several films that he was in. He basically had like a retrospective with Chai Ming Lang and at MoMA. And I remember during that time when he was on stage and he was being him outside of, Director Tsai's films, it felt like, I was like, I think he might be interested in this film that I'm writing. And I think he would be honestly really, really perfect for this role and give it something else that I hadn't even written. I am very familiar with his work, and I think what initially really drew me to him is he's incredibly funny, and he's also incredibly soulful. And his sense of timing, his sense of timing is so special. He's very funny. He makes a lot of jokes. And he is also someone that has his own timing, just the way that he is. There is a sort of magnetism, I think, to us being on his time. So a lot of when we were shooting scenes, you can even talking to Wu Kexi about this, she was like, how do I kind of be in his space and how do I interact with his energy? And that sort of, I think, contrast that she presents in the film and what he gives off is very interesting to watch. And that has a lot to do with again, his timing. And I think the films that he's been in, I think about, for example, The River. And I remember at that time he already had back issues. So there were a lot of things that I had changed and made it closer to who he was.
Just tailored it for him in a way.
Yeah, just tailored it for him. And so all of the neck stuff and all of his sort of body and the way that he moved, all of that I had changed for him, which wasn't very hard to do at all.
Yeah, he just so fully inhabits it. It's one of those sort of things where you can't even remotely imagine another actor doing it. It's just so, from the moment he starts talking, just he just draws you in. It's right. His inner life is so rich. Did you rehearse? Did you work with the in terms of sort of finding the scenes, or did you just kind of say, let's just save it for the day?
We did. We rehearsed basically 2 weeks leading up to the shoot. And because, again, Mandarin is not my first language, I had written this script in English. We essentially, me and Lee Kang-Sheng, Wu Kexi, we essentially sat down and read through the entire script. And basically they were telling me, again, thank goodness for these actors too. They were telling me what was working in the dialogue, what wasn't. And all I asked of them was, I'm really looking for these emotional beats to be clear. And from there, please feel free to make it your own, make the language your own and the dialogue. I really wanted them to be a part of this process. So I wasn't just writing and feeding it to them. Mm-hmm. So when we rehearsed, it was a lot of that. It was having them do the scene, what felt right, what didn't feel right, what I wanted to keep, and then how they would change it. And we went through the entire script and all the scenes that way and basically rewrote and changed things that weren't working.
There are occasions, particularly with writer-directors, where I've experienced it as an actor, where they get very precious with their words in a way, and there's a lock, and they're like, no, this is what it is. It has to be this. It's almost like a fist that you can't break through, and so your ability to be so fluid with that is great because it translated in this case, obviously, to it being right in Mandarin, but also in terms of those actors feeling very at ease.
Raphael, I'm curious. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this methodology. When you are, I think, acting and have experience acting in that methodology, let's call it, what do you notice are also the positives to that?
The positives to that?
Yeah, I'm curious.
You can come into what is very much a very clear vision. This is what it is, and this is what it has to be. And you, as an actor, then there is enormous structure in that. But
whose story is it? I mean, it's
it's very much that writer-director story. But there's a wonderful thing that Chekhov talks about, right? Where he talks about how at the end of the day, it's really the writer and then the actor, and they come together and they meld. He says it much more Chekhovian and poetic that I'm saying it, but essentially that what a great performance is a kind of a melding of both, right? So as an actor, when you're working with the writer director, kind of more rigid, I guess what what happens is you as an actor feel like you're in their movie, and it has. And I'm speaking, abstractly here. It's not always, right? It depends on the personality, but you can sometimes feel like you're sort of you're abdicating some of your own instincts, essentially, to kind of service that vision, if that makes sense.
Look, if you're locked into your vision, write a novel.
Yeah,
I mean, once you're making a movie, I mean, at some level, and I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not, the best movies ultimately are about the collaboration of the artists that are involved, and that's and you can respect the auteur theory, and some directors stronger than others, but at the end of the day, it's still a collaboration, and But yeah, I assume there are certainly, I mean,
I bring this up because I've been reading, I've been rereading some of these books, and one of them is from Bresson and how he talks about filmmaking. And he, I'm sure you've seen his films, and I think so much of the way that he uses actors is such a different sort of understanding of using actors for me. So that's why
they're a prop or a necessary. I need to put you here in this scene.
Yeah, literally don't act is what he's asking of the actors.
Don't move, don't act.
And his films are also, I guess, beautiful in that way because it's not really about the acting itself, right? It's about all the other pieces that are supporting his vision. And it's a different kind of filmmaking.
Did you at Columbia Film School is a great film school. So, I've had many friends go through it. But how much did they integrate how you work with actors? I guess in the process. I mean, you obviously clearly learned how to write, and the direction part of it, which is substantial enough. But I guess how much did they lean in, to how to talk to actors?
I had several classes literally called directing actors, where essentially the first semester, they basically force is not the right word, but they make you act in the class. Mm-hmm. And I find it to be it's not a very enjoyable process to me, acting. Right. So, but it was really helpful, I think, getting into the mindset of what an actor goes through when they receive information and direction, and like what is actually helpful. And I think those specific courses really allowed me to find a language to something that like a tool to how I would talk to actors, essentially. And a lot of it is about, for me, I like asking questions. I really like asking them, giving them circumstances that are quick and they can remember it. So that is a little bit of how I found that communication style, and it was in school. And a lot of it did have to do with improv and seeing improv in real time. I had one professor who was very interested in the way that Mike Lee worked. And we talked about the way that he worked and how he would build films through just improvisation. And that was very inspiring to me. I love his work.
Crazy about Mike Lee. Yeah. Absolutely.
Crazy about Mike Lee.
I was so upset that Hard Truth did not get more attention this year, because I thought the way in which that film, those characters, I mean, they were wholly realized. I mean, they had these, they must have had these incredible backstories, because there's, you just kind of dropped into the middle of this environment, and yet you feel all their past with each other.
Oh, absolutely. The lead actress, Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Yeah.
Incredible actor. Incredible actor. I must see more of her work. And I've only seen her in one other film called In Fabric, the I think it's a Peter Strickland film, where it's about a killer dress. Very cool. But she's also she's incredible.
Well, you go back and see Secrets and Lies, of course.
Yeah.
Secrets and Lies is where she was.
Exactly.
Incredible. You did what they say that one should do, right? Which is to write a personal story, and to then tell a story, particularly for your first feature, make something that's dear to your heart and personal. You've done that. My question now is, you have a film that's almost entirely shy of a couple lines in Mandarin. How do you go about getting the financing to make this movie? How do you actually how do you convince people who are, not Mandarin to come on board with you, I guess?
Extremely hard, Raphael.
Extremely hard.
A large
I gotta hear
struggle.
about how you did this. Yeah.
A lot of it was through my producer, Tony Yang, who I will give so much credit for. He and I went to film school together, and he found the money through his network of financiers. And it really was just so much. I would say that if it wasn't for him and his hustle, like, it is incredibly hard to make a movie like this in America. And I know how hard it is. And I know how impossible it is. God bless him.
Yeah.
That's all I will say with that.
Like done.
Giant producer kudos there. Because
seriously.
It's so wonderful that it got made. But holy Moses, that's, it's hard to make, a film in straight, in English for an English audience. And you've done the impossible. It's just astounding.
I wonder about, we had sent the script to so many producers and production companies, and I will say that, like, there is, I think, a understanding and a desire for stories like this, and I just wish people would take just a little bit more risk in like making films that aren't in English, but have the ability to transcend language. I put that into the universe,
1,000%. Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, our motto is not afraid of subtitles. And, once you get sort of past that, I mean, you're just watching people, and you can really relate to them and their experiences. The language to me becomes secondary.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's me. I get that. But there's also a huge audience out there that is, this is not going to be a subtitled film for, and I certainly hope that they, have an opportunity, and should have an opportunity to see it, and will, one assumes. Has the film already been released overseas?
Yeah, so I was in France at the beginning of March, and we released.
You were at
there.
Cannes, right? I mean, you won an award at Cannes as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the French have been really receptive.
It's a little Cannes thing, right? Yeah.
That little
I'm not going to talk about that.
I know. I'm like, let's move on.
Here's my award.
I'm surprised it's not on the bookshelf behind you. Right?
No, it's a lot of random other things. So we released it in France, and I would say that the reception and the publicity and all the sort of media coverage have been really, really positive. And I feel like, again, I'm also very grateful that, like, this was the first place that we released. Like, it was a very warm release. And now that we're
French
releasing,
cinephile, kind of audience really would get this. Yeah, exactly.
I say this, and I think that, of course, not everyone will like this movie, and taste is so subjective, but I really just hope that people in the US give the film a chance.
I wonder if it's okay to talk about this without giving too much away, but there's a scene later on where they're having dinner with Amy, and she says to him, "Why are you here?" Mm-hmm, and of course, then he explains it, and then she says at the end of the scene, "Do you know who you are here?" And it just knocked me out.
Was that specifically an indictment of him? Was she talking about herself?
That line in that conversation is something that is a conversation I've had with my mother so many times. And for me, that scene was always it's never about an indictment, but it's really about the sense of loss of an identity, loss of a homeland. A lot of the times when I have these conversations with my mother, she's always like, I could move back to Hong Kong. I could go back home. And then she'll be like, no, I actually can't do that because my life is here. I've set up everything here. And when she does go and visit her family still, I still have a lot of family members in Hong Kong and, grandmother and stuff like that. She's constantly comparing her sort of American self to the culture and the people there. And she no longer feels connected in this way. Mm-hmm. And when she comes back, it's always the same sentiment where it's like, I don't know who I am anymore. So that's why
she doesn't belong there, and she doesn't belong here in a way, right?
Yeah. And when, she's been here she's been here for decades now, and her life is still very much like this. I wouldn't say a bubble, but it's definitely small. It's definitely small to, I think, the life that I have. And I think that sort of feeling is something that I really did try to put into the scene. And it's a constant conversation that I have with her and my understanding of her.
I'm thinking of my own mother who moved here when she was 18, and 70 years later, almost, still not feeling, still hearkening back to something. And it's not there anymore. I mean, everything that she remembers from the Bogota of her youth is gone. And yet she doesn't exist. She feels more real in that place than here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's got to be incredibly hard. And in that sense, it's, film is really an American story.
Yeah, it is an American story.
That's my read of it.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, Greg. This is a very American story. And I think the perspective is very American. And I think the way that we define, like, who is American is something that I like to continually think about and have conversations about.
I'm just haunted by this. I remember back in Los Angeles, it was one day, maybe like the first warm day of spring or something, and my wife and I were out at the bluffs in Pacific, at Santa Monica, and just everybody was out and enjoying, that first warm day of spring. It's families and everybody, and just seeing a young man, 20 or something like that, sitting on a bench, and he was alone, and there was a certain sadness on his face. And he's, clearly, or to me, certainly seemed to be an immigrant. And just the sense of everything that was going through his mind. Here he is in this beautiful spot, and he's seeing all this wonderful stuff going on around him. And maybe the country that he came from or the place that he came from, obviously, we know that there's, some terrible things going on in the world. And yet, this isolation in this public environment, it was just so memorable for me. This goes back 5-6 years, and I can still see him sitting there, and wanting to know what the story is. And your film is not his story by any stretch, but it is, it's that. It's just that. It's that story of these people, and so real.
So real. So, and you speak, we've talked, here about themes and things, but you do it with such a light hand, and you don't ever, you take us on a journey, which is through these people's trajectory that says so much without saying it, which again is extremely hard to do, particularly when you're trying to structure it into an hour and a half.
It makes me hungry for more. I'd love to see more of your next films, and hope that they're coming soon. But in the meantime, we have Blue Sun Palace, which is going to be opening again on April 25th. You're opening at the Metrograph in New York?
Exactly.
Okay.
Metrograph in New York.
It's such a cool theater. That's good.
Are you going to be there for Q&A?
Yeah, I'll be there for Q&A. So I'm very, very excited.
All right. We are opening the same date in Los Angeles. So obviously we will not have the benefit of your presence there, but people will have the benefit of seeing the film. Where can we get information?
We have a Instagram set up, Blue Sun Palace Film. So please head over to Instagram, and all of our links and the theaters that we're showing in and ticketing information, all of that is there.
Okay, the distributor's Decanalog. That's DEKANALOG. I think, did I get that right? Yeah, I think I got that. We'll put it down below in the description, but you can get information from the distributor's website. I assume it's going to be all over Letterboxd, and hopefully already with tons of positive comments. Yeah. And do we know other markets after New York and Los Angeles? Anything set that you want to tell us about? Yeah,
so we are premiering we're releasing in Spain in August, and a couple of other European countries. Like, I know we're going to be in Benelux, Switzerland, I think Turkey. So we'll be all over.
All right. For all our international viewers, you can get a shot at this film.
And Taiwan.
And Taiwan.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad about that.
End of the month.
Are you flying out for that?
No. So I actually have to go back to Paris because I'm doing a residency there. So yeah, I will be back. Yeah.
Constance, we started this process of talking to filmmakers whose films are opening in theaters to kind of really highlight, in a way, I want to say, smaller movies, not small in theme or small in
smaller releases.
But smaller releases, and yours is absolutely why we do this, because this is a film that people should see. It's just wonderful, and we're so happy to be able to sort of bring attention to it because it's so worthy. And I echo what Greg said. It's just, I can't wait to see your next film.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate this conversation.
If you've enjoyed our conversation, please make sure to like, please make sure to subscribe, share this episode with friends, with people who are going to have a chance to see this movie as it rolls out around theaters in North America and theaters around the world. And thank you, Constance Tsang, for joining us on Inside the Art House.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. See you next time.
Our show was produced by Raphael Sparge with on-site producer Norrin Dickerson. Supervising producers are Miles McCreary and Thomas Cassetta. Our show was edited by Gabriel Lemley and mixed by Thomas Cassetta. Our musical theme was composed by Isabel Engman and Gerardo Garcia Jr. Marketing by Gabriel Lemley. Show graphics by Jenna DeAngelis and show open edited by Rick Pratt. Filmed at the historic Lumley Royal Theater in Los Angeles, California. See you next time on Inside the Art House. If you like today's show, please consider subscribing to our channel to hear more on Inside the Art House.